Hey now, welcome to the 10th episode of the Help Find the Others podcast. If you've been here for all 10, well then I thank you for being supportive and sticking with us. And if this is your first time catching our podcast, well then welcome. So I know I usually start out with a quote, but I really don't have one for today. Because I wanted to just talk about how, we're in double digits of this podcast now. And while I'm sure we'll do many more, just the fact that we've done 10 of these and I'm happy with all of them has just got me pretty excited about recording this one. And I just want to thank everyone that has been subscribing and commenting and liking on YouTube channels, and if you're listening to this podcast on other streaming services and you've spread the word or sent links or helped our ratings or whatever you're doing to spread the message, I really appreciate it, because I feel that it's just growing and picking up steam. I wouldn't have had the inspiration and really the ability to talk about these things without my path in life crossing the guest for this show, without crossing his path. So I'd like to introduce you guys to Sean. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. So Sean and I worked together for, I think, like 4.5 years, 5 years, something like that. And we had this crazy job that involved walking around in the woods and talking and sitting in cars and talking and basically just kind of being out on our own. And we were both, psychonauts already and into, cannabis and other things. And we just had basically all the stuff that I've talked about on this podcast. I spent about 4 years talking with Sean about. So I really, I'm glad you could come on, man, because, our conversations and the experiences we've shared and everything were a huge inspiration for this whole channel and everything we're doing.
That's so awesome.
Yeah. And I hope our other friends too, within time, maybe we can have them on. We were really lucky to have this group of people that, really kind of our conversations, made me realize there's others out there. And, we were working in this very straight-laced government program and then found others in it. It was drawn, they were drawn to it. So the other person that this podcast wouldn't be possible without is Stahn, and he's on the line too. How you doing, buddy?
Good. What's up, man?
Good. Yeah. So, I mean, both of you guys, honestly, are just as responsible for anything that's happened with this channel as I am. But we talked about it in our last episode, I believe, about wild mushrooms. But I wanted to start off with telling, or I'll let you tell it, Sean, of our story of when we first encountered ovoid, the psilocybe ovoid cystiata, or however you pronounce it, that we were able to find those at work and what went about with that. You want to tell the story?
Yeah, sure, man. So first I want to say thanks, Rubin, for having me on. Been listening to the podcast. It's awesome. It's really entertaining. It makes it even more special to know that these are the same kind of conversations we were having in the cars on, many a day at work, and that you've polished your craft and you're getting it out there for everybody, because it's great. It's really entertaining. And, there's nobody out there doing this kind of thing. And I think it means a lot to have other people that are, normal people. This isn't a community of crazy, drug-addled psychopaths as society would have you believe. And everybody's normal people, and they have normal, interesting lives, and have normal, interesting jobs. And I think it kind of makes you feel more at peace with your own mindset and your outlook on things when you see that other people are having normal conversations about things that are, somewhat taboo, or have at least been taboo for a while. And I want to say thanks for putting that out there, because I think it's going to really make a big impact in some people's lives that are listening to it. So thank you.
Awesome, man.
But as far as the story that you're talking about, so we had access to some state public land that was near where we worked. And we would always, in some free downtime, when we had, a free lunch break or some extra time to basically kick around in the woods, we would all the time go out to this area because it was a nice area. And the quest for the mushroom actually began basically after we started getting interested in mushrooms in general, because, we were in the woods all the time. And, besides the fantastic relationships with my friends I've made at that job, probably the next second favorite thing of that job was discovering a fascination for the mycelial kingdom, I guess we could say, the fungal kingdom, because I mean it became a big part of our everyday thoughts. Like, hey, maybe it's going to rain next week. Might be a good time to go hunting for mushrooms.
Yeah.
You start thinking it really connects you with nature when you start to realize there's a whole kingdom that, oftentimes gets overlooked, especially in Western society. So as far as, our quest for, a wild psilocybe, that started there, seeing interesting mushrooms that, we didn't know necessarily. And then you start to learn a few over time, and then you start to gain some skills. And this was you'll agree with me on this, Rubin. It was, a several years of evolution.
Yeah.
For as far as coming to the point where we were able to successfully hunt for and identify and, all of those things for this wild psilocybin mushroom. So, we'll fast forward a little bit. After we started getting more comfortable with the mushrooms and, realized that there's, I think it was you actually that brought it to our attention, that there's this, what everybody calls ovoids, or ovoid cystidiata, I believe is how you pronounce it. So I'm not a mycologist. We're just hobby mushroom hunters. So maybe that's how you pronounce it. But essentially, they grow in floodplains in springtime. They can come up anytime from when the morels start to show, and they can extend all the way into June. It seems like once you start getting sustained 80+ degree days, they go away. But they like the creek banks where certain species of trees live. Not to get too nerdy on the species, but box elders, elms, things like that, silver maples, areas like that along creek banks where there's some sort of floodplain environment. So we knew the type of habitat, and we knew the areas we could find in this public land that would be conducive for this species. So we did all the research. I mean, Rubin, we probably looked for a year before we actually found them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
At least maybe even long, maybe like a year and a half, because they really come up in the spring. But I think we started looking in the fall because we'd read somewhere on the websites or whatever that they may fruit in fall sometimes. So perhaps even a year and a half. But like I say, we were in the right time of year, and we were in the right locations, having looked for them for, like I say, a year and a half. And we came into an area that was littered with thousands of mushrooms in pretty much the exact same environment we've read about. And actually, I think you may have been sick that day from work, I think.
or like
initially.
Yeah, or I wasn't with you guys. I think I was like out doing with another crew or whatever. And yeah, you guys texted me pictures, or I wasn't there when you first found them.
Yeah, initially, and two other coworkers were with us, and one coworker, he's really good at the edible stuff, but he was like, I don't know about that, and because I picked some, because it just seemed like there's no way we're looking for this thing we've looked for, for a year plus, and then there's this area full of these mushrooms, and like I pick one, and it's like, man, that looks a little bit like it's kind of bruised and blue. I mean, it kind of looks like. My initial reaction was actually, this is it. And when I showed it to my coworker, he's like, I don't know about that. And then I showed our other coworker, our other friend, and he was like, well, maybe. And then set it on a log. We walked around for a little while longer, and then we came back by the mushroom that was picked, and it looked darker, like it was like blackish blue, I should say. It wasn't like a really blue. It was like a really dark blue. And our one buddy, he said, hey, that looks kind of blue. And I was like, yeah, I think so too. And I took pictures. And when we got out into an area where we had cell phone reception, I texted them to you. And you said, oh, wow, that does look like them. And so the next day when you got to work, actually, I remember what happened. We put those pictures. I put the pictures I had on Reddit, and you put pictures on Facebook.
Yeah,
and we had several responses that were all like, "Yeah, that's ovoids," because we had some pretty good pictures. They had a picture, with several clusters, and they had bruising, and they could see the gills and all the other telltale identification, including like where 2 or 3 mushrooms were together. Clustered together, and one had dropped spores on top of the other, so you could really see the spores. Had some pretty good feelings about that. So the next day we basically picked as many as we could. I mean, it seemed like thousands. In all reality, it probably wasn't. It probably was hundreds.
Oh, but yeah, easy.
It seemed like we probably did pick thousands over the course of the next month, though, after we found that. But essentially, from my recollection, we just took some spore prints, and we made sure they were what they needed to be.
Well, I was the guinea pig too. Remember
yeah, that's right.
The one I ate one, and it was like at the end of the day, and we were like heading home, and I was like, "Well, I'll tell you guys how I feel," and and like I was about halfway home, and the whole back of my neck and head were tingling. I'm like, "Okay, well, I didn't get poisoned." But it was really gross, like eating a fresh mushroom. I don't know. I know there's some people that eat fresh cubes. I've actually did that before too. But it's different. Like if you like got fresh cubes that you were growing, and it's a cleaner environment. But I mean, this is like a dirty river mushroom, and like and still fresh pick. It was pretty terrible choking it down, but about an hour and a half later, I definitely knew that we had found the droids we were looking for.
Yeah. And I mean, really, it was a pretty just amazing. The whole thing, it was amazing memory for me, especially with you guys, and it's really cool to feel like, oh wow, here's something that can literally blast you off.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not literally, but I mean, kind of literally. I mean, your mind, it blasts you off to some other dimension, some other consciousness state.
Absolutely.
And it's just growing right here, by some creek in a state park.
Yeah. Well, and that's the craziest part of the story for me is the fact that the spot where we first found him, even though we found him in other places, was the spot. It was like our weed smoking spot that we like went to for years, like at least a couple times a week to smoke a cigarette or smoke weed. And we would sit there. And for that year and a half that we were aware of ovoids and we were looking for them, we would convene in that spot, be like, man, I know there's probably some over in this area, on this property. We would sit there and talk about ovoids every day in this one spot. And then they just popped up
and this is a spot where like people are going and fishing and drinking beer and stuff all the time. I mean, like how many times would we go there and there'd be a pile of beer cans from somebody that fished, that weekend and didn't clean up their trash. I mean, this is not like a pristine natural place. This is, it's
a fishing hole.
It's a fishing hole.
Public fishing hole.
About what, 100, 200 yards from the parking lot? I mean,
Yeah. And what's crazy about it too is like it's a perfect, now that we know the habitat of this mushroom, it's the perfect habitat right there. And we would stand there and talk about these other places that we thought it might be when we were like right where we needed to be.
Right. Yeah, that was awesome. And, the fact that, those exist, it still kind of blows my mind. That's been, almost 3 years, I think, since we found those or something like that. And man, it still blows my mind that, when you find a patch of those, I mean, let's put it this way. You won't need to, have some sort of, connection or, or, you'll be giving them away.
Yeah.
I mean, they're so bountiful. When you find a spot like that,
you only need to find it once a year and you're good,
Yeah. There's no need to go through any kind of legal risks, other than getting them out of that spot.
Yeah. Well,
and taking them home. And chances are, you just tell law enforcement that you know how to find wild mushrooms, and they're not going to know what they are.
Yeah.
That's what's the crazy thing about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to quote Ricky, I mean, cops are dumb as fuck, especially state park cops. State park cops are the dumbest fucking cops are. No, but like, what's awesome is like everybody knows that people go to state parks to look for morels, and I think if you ran across a cop that was like, what are you doing over there? And you were like, I'm looking for morels. And you showed him those. He'd be like, you dumb bastard. Those aren't morels. And that, like, that's it. Like it's.
Yeah, at best.
Right. And you could just be like, oh, all right. Well, I'm probably going to take them home and see what they are, And like.
Oh, yeah.
While I don't think it should be illegal to pick natural psychotropic plants in general, but definitely mushrooms. Like, I just don't think, like, unless you're selling them or whatever, I don't think you're like gonna get caught doing that.
Right. Right.
But
maybe if all of a sudden in that small town there was all of a sudden a big boom in mushroom related things, and if there was evidence. But I mean, as far as for like personal use, if you were to go mushroom hunting and find some wild mushrooms, I mean, your risk legally has to be extremely minimal as far as, consuming mind-altering substances.
Yeah.
But I mean, besides the fact that you could do yourself some severe harm if you misidentify,
right?
The mushrooms.
Yeah, which is funny because that's not illegal. Like, you could go and pick as many poisonous mushrooms as you want and have a bag full of them and be like, they're destroying angels, and like, okay, like it wouldn't matter, Right. So that's what, that's just the fact that mushrooms are illegal is kind of ridiculous anyway. But that, that's just the double standard there with, that, we've talked about a bunch of times, like how stupid the war on plants is. Just look at cannabis, where like you could collect as much poisonous plants as you want, but you can't grow weed, but.
Oh yeah. Like Jimson weed,
right?
Yeah. Or I mean, that'll take you, into some sort of underworld dimension for 3 days at a time, permanently damage your liver, perhaps. You could easily die from it, of overingestion. But I see it growing everywhere in roadside dishes. I mean, everywhere.
Oh yeah.
Any abandoned field, and in no way, shape, or form am I encouraging anyone to be messing with that, devilish stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's no legal ramifications for going and, going on some sort of zombie trip for 3 days.
Yeah. Well, and as far as like, I know that gets thrown in the psychedelic discussion, but it's not. I think it's a deliriant, right? Isn't it?
It's a deliriant, deliriant,
and like it. Okay, so if you look at other natural psychoactive plants, like they look appealing or smell appealing. Like that thing has these awful fucking thorns on it. Like that plant is just telling you, leave me the fuck alone.
It looks like a devil weed.
Yeah. I mean, it's like one of the only things cows won't eat in a pasture, like it's that kind of fucked up. But yeah.
Could one of you explain what a spore print is to a T? I see them all over online, but I don't understand the benefits other than like documentation.
So spores are one of the like defining characteristics when you're trying to find out a species of mushroom, and the spore color. And then if you look at it under a microscope, like there's different shapes and characteristics. I don't know about that. I don't know about the microscope work in identifying mushrooms, but I'm not sure. So
just like anything in biology, a lot of times you're using the dichotomous key. And so by identifying these mushrooms and having the spore print, you're going to be able to, further delve into the identification of a mushroom. Gotcha. For instance, by using the spore print. It's just like Rubin said, it's one of, many different identifying characteristics that mycologists or hobby mycologists or mushroom hunters have at their disposal to properly identify a species of mushroom.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And that's just what, taking the cap and pressing it?
You basically, cut off the cap, right at the stem where it's close to where the cap meets, just flush with the where the cap is, and then put it on a piece of paper or a black piece of it would be good if you had two specimens that are the same, and you could put one on white paper and one on black paper, because some spore prints are white and they're going to show up on the black paper actually better. But white paper, put a drop of water, a couple drops of water on the cap, spore print down on the paper, and then put a cup over top. And after a few hours, you'll have a spore print, and then it'll have a color. And then you could also look at it under a microscope, and each of the individual spores have characteristics, their shape and size. So you can actually get a lot of information combined with other physical characteristics. So just like identifying plants or other hard to identify species, it comes down to, basically going through a checklist of details of what are the identifying characteristics. And
that's awesome.
Spore print. Yeah, that's just one of the tools you would have in identifying mushrooms.
Yeah. And it's really important if you're looking for ovoids, it's really important to do the spore print, because there's another mushroom that grows in the same area called deadly galerina. And that mushroom, the smaller ones of that and ovoid are really hard to tell apart. But the spore print of ovoids is purple, which is the same as cubensis ones are. But then the spore print of the galerina is like kind of like peach colored. And so they're really obviously different. And I had a couple that I went out to one of our spots and I picked a bunch. I was like, I don't know, these could be it. They weren't bruising blue, but they don't always do that anyway. And so I was like, well, I'm going to take a spore print. And I was like, pretty sure they were it though, honestly. And then I did the spore print and I was like, oh, no, it's not. And I threw it away. And that one, yeah, I mean, you might not die from it, but you would get really sick.
You might die.
You might die. If you ate enough of it, you might die, or you could have a bad reaction to it too. So you don't want to you want to
probably not good for your liver, or, it's probably not good for your liver or your kidneys or your, so yeah.
But it's also, it's just like Sean said, it's one of the things that make up the whole, how sure you can be in identifying it. And I found some other ones that I was like, I don't know. I did a spore print of it and the spore print was right, but it didn't have a, it didn't bruise blue and it didn't have a gelatinous pellicle, which is the top covering will be kind of shiny and wet looking, and you can kind of peel it back. And this other mushroom, I don't know what it was, but it did have like purplish looking spores, but it didn't have this like layer to the top of it. So it's like, if all of the things don't go together, you shouldn't eat the mushroom, or, you should definitely research it more and trying to find more specimens. The other advantage of taking a spore print is you can, spread those spores, which, I know we tried to, spread spores around wherever we were. And so that's one way. Whenever you collect any mushrooms, or if someone's growing cubes, like, you should take the spore prints, because that's how you can, propagate more.
Oh, okay. Yeah. See, I mean, I heard about that, the propagation side of the spore print, but I just couldn't understand it. I just didn't understand how a print would be able to produce more of the species.
Well, you're just, when you cut the top off the cap and let it sit on the paper, it just drops all its spores, which is what a mushroom is meant to do anyway.
Oh, okay.
Like over the course of like a day or two, normally a mushroom grows to the point that its cap goes from being downward facing to it slowly upturns on the sides and basically spits all its spores out. So basically by putting a few drops of water and putting it on some paper and just putting a glass over it and keeping the humidity high like it would want in nature, it'll naturally want to eject its spores.
And for anyone listening that hasn't tried ovoids too, like, I think that I like the experience better than cubes, and you do too, right, Sean?
I agree. Oh, absolutely. And I don't want to sound like a snob, but I mean, I prefer them, so much to the point that the few times that I've had a little bit of cubensis since we discovered those ovoids and started taking those, like, I find that the body aspect is so different.
Yeah.
I find that the wild ovoids, I guess it just depends on what your preferences are for an effect. But for me, I prefer a really like crystal clear head effect. That doesn't mean that you don't have to lay down on the come up, but it just feels like it's just, for me, it doesn't like dominate like the body load.
Yeah.
Like cubensis does. I don't feel like I just have to lay there and squirm for the first hour. I feel like I can, kind of get on with it.
Yeah. I mean, and I know, like, there's a lot of people on the West Coast that listen to this podcast, and they've probably done like pans, cyans, and all, the other like Pacific Northwest ones. And like, I've never done those species, and I don't think you have either, right?
No.
Yeah, but they sound like they're so strong that it's like, I really think, like, I'm glad I live where I live, and that the native one is ovoids, because I like it better than what it sounds like in the rest of the country,
And your mileage may vary, but I think I've pretty much only had positive, experiences with it. Obviously set and setting are extremely important, but like my last time I did it, it was this last year. I met up with you guys, and we went and we hunted for them, and we had some, and I brought them home, and they weren't even all the way dried out. I couldn't tell you an accurate weight. There was 21 of them now, and even though I had spore prints, I consumed them. And there's that moment where I went and laid in my bed. It was in the summer. It was a beautiful day outside. Did it during the day, and laid in the bed. And there was that moment where it's like, what if you picked the wrong ones? The ones that would kill you. And I thought to myself, if it happens, it happens. If I'm going to lay right here in this bed and die because of some wild mushrooms I misidentified and ate, so be it. And I swear that I feel like that just completely unlocked it to be just almost the most, the most stress-free psychedelic experience I've ever had. It was just like, it just released all tension, just to say, like, you know, the worst thing that could happen is to sit here and die. You know, at this point, I'm okay with that. You know, I trust my own abilities to identify this mushroom. You know, it's going to be okay. And
Yeah.
and it was like, boom, as soon as I just released that, and then I went outside and I laid in the sun and just like watched the clouds pass, and just was so appreciative of nature.
Yeah.
And a beautiful day. And I really think it was that moment where it was just like, you know, what if these things are my demise? And it's like, you know, it's too late now, you know, no fighting against it, just let it go. And I couldn't trust in myself to have that same mental response every time, but for whatever reason, that was my mental response in that moment. And it was beautiful. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And like we were talking about, the effect is so crystal clear. And I don't know how much you've touched on, I haven't listened to all the other podcasts. I'm about halfway through them. I don't know how much you've touched on, you know, ingesting cannabis while under a psychedelic experience, but I abstained from, you know, cannabis in this period, and at least for the majority of this psychedelic experience that day. And I found that the effect is just so different, you know, from when you do consume cannabis, and it just really changes the course, because I mean, it becomes really muddled and cloudy on the, or not cloudy, but you know, I don't know. What's your opinions on that, or your guys? I don't know. Not to transition, but
no, we're the same way. Like it, you know, but everyone's different, because, you know, there's a lot of people that we've talked to, or that, you know, that I've seen on Reddit or whatever, that, you know, they kind of follow the Terrence McKenna suggestion of like, when you start feeling it come on, you like smoke until you can't smoke anymore. And,
right.
You know, I understand that, but it's always led to like this, like anxiety and paranoia for me. And, you know, I kind of stopped smoking until like the come down, you know, phase.
Yeah.
Yeah. This experience in particular helped me realize that I definitely prefer that, because, besides the fact that mentally I was, allowing this, flow state to, happen instead of resisting anything. I also feel like, that abstaining from cannabis for, the periods leading up to, and about, 2/3 of the way through the experience, really, I don't know, it was just an amazing experience.
Yeah.
Just a really, and I know that, people, there's a lot of reasons to, seek psychedelics, for your own therapeutic experience. And, I hear you guys talk about it all the time, and Rubin, you and I have talked about it quite a bit. I don't really think there's anything that is a totally bad trip. I think like there's bad experiences, difficult experiences that can lead to, breakthrough positive things. But for this particular experience, it was nothing but positive. And perhaps I didn't even have as much, positive things to, take away long term, other than, try to enjoy life and enjoy, nature. Just have a good time sometimes. There's nothing wrong with just realizing that, to enjoy yourself and have a good time is also, it's good.
Yeah. Well, and, I've kind of found that, most of my bad trips or difficult trips came from a bad set or setting. And, while the setting you can think is perfect, you could be lying to yourself about the set going on, though, and like, that's where I think that I've been at sometimes, is where I'm like, all right, I got everything set. I'm good. I'm in a good mood, where it's like, yeah, but you got some shit you're working out in your head, though, and then the mushrooms bring that to the forefront. So that, like, that's what I've always felt about bad trips, and you can't ever really blame the substance. And I mean, I know there's a possibility, and there's theories out there that it's, the mushroom spirits like do take it a bad, demonic shift or whatever. And I don't know. I don't know how much I really believe in that. I think it's all our psychology,
Right.
that lead to having a bad time. But I
think like anything, it's, how you deal with adversity, both mentally and physically, because, when you consume a psychedelic mushroom, you're going to experience both. There's going to be some physical discomfort, most likely. And there's going to be some, at the very least, the initial roller coaster come up.
Yeah. Well, and, and honestly, like, it was kind of the ovoids that helped me realize that, because when we did find them, like, I was kind of overdoing cubes at that point. I remember, like, I was like texting you like every weekend, like, well, tripping again tonight, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I started like feeling like, oh man, the mushroom spirits don't like me, or this strain doesn't like me. I was getting kind of those kind of feelings. And I remember after we knew they were legit ovoids and dried them out and everything. And I remember taking them the first time. I was like, I'm just going to try a gram. And I knew they would be more powerful. So I was kind of expecting it to be more than taking a gram of cubes, but it was almost like taking an eighth of cubes, honestly. And
in some ways, but then in other ways, it was like probably like taking a lot less.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was like less anxious, and I felt like embraced by psilocybin, like that. It was just like, it was like a hug, instead of like, instead of taking me on this, scary ride that they had been at that point. And it's just weird. I mean, I guess I kind of like to show how powerful they actually are. I want to tell a story about a friend of ours. I won't say his name, I guess, because I don't know if he wants to come on here or not, but I'll tell the story anyway. To where this last season in the spring, where we the same batch that you were saying that you took outside, I think. I had tickets to the what's the Grateful Dead now with John Mayer? What's that called?
Dead and Company.
Yeah, to Dead and Company. And and he's into the Dead, and I had an extra ticket, and my wife couldn't go, so I was like, "You want to go, man?" And he's like, "Oh yeah." So we went, and we had, like, the weekend before that, we had found the ovoids, and we didn't get that much. Like, we got like, I think maybe 3 or 4 grams dried each. And so he was like, "Hey, I'm gonna make some tea with the ovoids." He's like, "I'm hoping to find some doses in the parking lot. If I do, you can drink this tea." And I was like, "All right, that's cool." I was driving, so I was like, I don't know if I will or not, but that's cool. I'll probably drink some of it. And so we got there and walked around, and he made the tea. I think he said he put 2 grams in it. So just 2 grams of ovoids, which, I think they're supposed to be like, 1.5 times as potent or whatever. So that's probably like 3 grams or whatever. Not a lot if 2 people are splitting it. Well, he couldn't find doses. So on the way in, he opens the bottle up. He's like, "Do you want some of this?" And so I took like 2 swigs out of a kombucha, like a GT's kombucha bottle. And so not that much of tea made with 2 grams. And he drank the rest. And both of us are very, we can hold our mushrooms. Like, neither of us thought this was going to be anything overwhelming. Well, now this goes back to talking about smoking smoking cannabis with mushrooms and how much it potentiates it. We met up with some buddies too. And we were behind this dude who was like one of those kind of like yuppie deadheads. And he was dancing around, and he was lighting these joints up like the size of my thumb and passing them back. He would take like 1 hit and pass it to us. And there was 4 of us standing there, and we were passing the joints back and forth. And by the time I got to the 3rd person, he had another one lit up and would pass that along. So we were just like, at one point I had these 2 huge joints in my hand, and I'm like, what the hell, And so the mushrooms had already started to kind of kick in, but that like kicked it up to where I was like tripping, like seeing tracers and everything, like I was like, holy shit. And it was mostly because I just gotten so goddamn high, and like uncharacteristically, like even if I do smoke when I'm on mushrooms, I don't smoke that much. I'm not like passing joints around, And I mean, I got such anxiety from the come up that we were all done and everyone was like, I don't need any more. And the dude had just lit one up. He's like, well, pass it on to someone else in the crowd. And I got super paranoid that I was going to hand a joint to a cop at a Grateful Dead show. And that, like, if that's going to happen to anyone, it'll happen to me. And I'm like looking around at everyone, and I became like convinced that everyone was a cop, and I was afraid to give them the joint. So I sat there and I just kept hitting it. And so the dude turns around and he's like, pass it to someone else. And I'm like, I can't. and I was like, I'm afraid I'm going to give it to a cop. And he just like shook his head and took the joint from me and just handed it to the person next to me. And like, it was just funny, but that's how messed up I was from 2 swigs of that tea.
And then it's almost like if you didn't have any experience with cannabis and then you did like, the best stuff you know, that exists, and you overdid it with that.
Yeah,
it's really not that different. It's just that, like you said, it, with the under psilocybin, it really potentiates the, the effects of the cannabis.
Yeah. Well, and then, to show how potent the rest of the tea was, our buddy that, like I said, can handle his mushrooms for sure. He was tripping so much, like, cause we got back out to the parking lot and I was like, I can't drive yet. I was like, I'm surprised how fucked up I am, but I'm not going to drive like this. Let's just wait for the traffic to die down. So we were sitting at my car, and we're just hanging out, talking or whatever. And there's almost nobody in the parking lot except another car that's sitting, maybe 100 yards away from us. And this dude's sitting in a lawn chair playing guitar. And he gets up and he starts walking. We could tell he's either going to take a piss behind our car or he's coming to talk to us. And he's got his guitar and he's friendly as hell. And he's like, talk to us. He's from St. Louis, and he was wondering if we know of any parking lots that like would be cool with him parking in and sleeping overnight so he can leave in the morning and stuff like that. And like him and our buddy are talking about the set, like the Grateful Dead set, like what songs they played, and like talking about that, like having like a brotherly Deadhead moment and all this stuff. And then he was playing guitar. He's like, either you play guitar, and I was like, I do. And so like I had his guitar. I'm sitting there playing acoustic guitar, and the guy pulls out an apple out of his pocket, and he's like, you guys want an apple? And I was like, no, I'm okay, man. And but I did see in our friend's face, it just shifted, and he was all of a sudden weirded out. And the dude's like holding the apple in his hand, and he's like playing with it, and I'm playing his guitar, and then he's like, you guys got any kids? And I was like, yeah, I got 2 kids. And then all of a sudden our buddy, and I started talking about my kids, like their age and stuff, and our buddy cuts me off and he's like, what's up with that fucking apple? And the dude's like, what? And he's like, what's up with that apple? I don't like that. And he's like, it's just an apple, man. And he took a bite out of it. He's like, see, it's just an apple. And he's like, yeah, I don't know, it's weirding me out. And then I was like, okay. And I had to like stop playing guitar, and I'm holding the guitar, and he's like, why don't you give that guy his guitar back? And I'm like, okay, here you go, dude. And I gave him the apple. And like the guy's like, I'm just hanging out waiting for traffic to die down, man. I don't know if you think I'm trying to mug you or whatever. And he's like, yeah, I don't think we need anything from you, man. I think you need to get going, or said something, like told him to leave. And like at first, I like thought he was messing with us or messing with me, but he was dead serious. And the guy started walking away, and he's like, man, my spidey senses are tingling. I'm like, why? I'm like, the guy was just hanging out. And I was like, if anything, like he had mentioned Jesus or God or something like that. And I was like, if anything, he was just Christian or whatever. And he's like, no, he's a fucking cop. I know it. And I was like, what's he trying to cop out here? Like, what are we doing?
Getting your fingerprints on his guitar.
Yeah. And like, he's like, I bet that apple was like a microphone, or he said something. He thought the apple was some sort of bug. And I'm like,
when you first told me that story, all I could think of was Benicio del Toro in Fear and Loathing when Lacerda's leaving the room. He's like, we're on to you, man.
Yeah, we're on to you. Yeah. But I mean, he can hold his own, and it's not like he was drunk. Like it was like weed and maybe 1.5 grams of ovoids, and like he was at least that weirded out. I mean, they are potent fucking things, man. The ovoids are no joke. But so someone asked in the Discord, which by the way, if anyone hasn't join that Discord chat. It's just a messaging app kind of thing. And we've got to help find the others Discord. And it's been pretty cool. Like it was kind of dormant for a while, but it's really picked up and there's some really good people posting in there, but we'd send links and just chat about stuff. So we put before podcasts when we're recording, Stahn posts, who's going to be on and what they're into. And someone asked about like talking about morning glory seeds as like a natural, psychedelic that just exists in plants. I forgot. Do you have any experience with morning glory seeds?
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't. The closest experience that I have is I was with some close friends. I didn't participate myself, but they all ingested some baby Hawaiian wood rose seeds.
Yeah.
And it turned bad for a couple people. Their stomach started hurting really bad, and it kind of like it never was. It seemed from their accounts like it never really fully like kicked in. Now, granted, we were a lot younger, and like I don't know about you guys, but I wasn't necessarily as in touch with my consciousness and physical state as I was when I was younger, and I wasn't consuming them either. But it seemed like from my friends' experience, it wasn't the greatest in the end. But no, I don't have any experience.
Yeah, I tried it like in high school. Or no, actually it was like after I moved, because I did a lot of acid in high school. And then when I moved here, I couldn't find acid for a while. And so I had like looked online about, more Hawaiian baby wood rose. And I think I like found a recipe of how to prepare it on the Anarchist cookbook. And I think it had something about like soaking the seeds in like lighter fluid or so. I can't remember. I should have looked that up. But
is it some sort of like LSA extraction or something like that?
Well, no, it's to get rid of the like seed coating, which is what can hurt your stomach. And so I didn't take enough. I think I took 50 seeds, like, cause I think it suggests 50 to 100 or something like that. And I took the lowest of the suggested dosage, and did whatever the thing was, whatever I could in a dorm room. And, I kind of tripped, but it was, like I was really nauseous the whole time. And I think I did throw up. I can't really remember. It was a long time ago. But it was kind of the same as like robo tripping, like if you've ever drank a whole bottle of cough syrup, like it's been a while since I've done that too, obviously, but it was a similar experience to me of just being like kind of tripping, but I kind of feel sick, like that kind of experience. But I've talked with a lot of people and of ways to do like the LSA extraction, and it might be something I revisit. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting too. Like you said, I mean, just the fact that, again, going back to like what we were talking about before, there's, these plants that grow around us, that are both cultivated and, grow wild and natural.
Yeah.
That like you said, I mean, they're probably not legal once you do the chemistry involved. But I mean, for psychonauts out there that have a scientific mind and the, desire to do a lot of research on the internet, it's all out there, and I think that's kind of crazy, just like homemade DMT extraction.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, again, and it goes back to too, like, it's a beautiful flower, it's like attractive, right? Like you would want to cultivate it. You would want to collect the seeds to cultivate. You would be drawn to this plant naturally. And there's gotta be something to that. I just got done reading LSD, My Problem Child, that Albert Hoffman wrote. I mean, he wrote it like right before he died. So, I mean, he's pretty old. So it's pretty current research that he used to write the book. But I didn't know, obviously he's famous for being the chemist that first, synthesized or made LSD 25. But I didn't know that, like, kind of the rest of his life, he became just solely focused on finding naturally occurring entheogens and understanding, finding the alkaloids that have their effect with them. Because I know Sasha Shogun like basically was playing with molecules like they were Tinker Toys and creating new molecules. But Albert went all around the country or the world, like seeking out, traditional entheogenic plants. And I also didn't know that he's the one that came up. He was the first one that extracted psilocybin and psilocin and created those names for those chemicals. Yeah. I didn't know that, but
I didn't know he came up with the name of those. I did know that he came up with the, a synthetic version, and that was kind of what kick-started, the very first kind of exposure to psilocybin to Western culture.
Yeah.
As far as like, non-native indigenous usage.
Yeah. Well, and he, someone had already extracted LSA though, and so he did work with that and went to Mexico to collect samples of morning glory seeds and stuff like that. But I can't remember now. I can't remember the details, but I think they had discovered LSA first. And because like it's kind of chemically similar or whatever, like that's where he got the lysergic acid part of naming LSD. He came up with the diethylamide or whatever because that's the chemistry he did to the ergot extract or whatever. But because its structure then became like lysergic acid, like that's why LSA and LSD have similar names. Like, you can't make one out of the other, but they have a common thing that's part of the naming of it. So that's where he came up with that. And like the 25 is like, it was the 25th molecule that he made, and it had that effect where the other ones didn't, from just a little minor change here and there. So it's a really good book. I mean, I thought it was going to be real chemistry heavy, and it more talked about, I think he was really religious, but he also like felt that psychedelics were, and their, how much they're in nature and how important they are to people. Like that's part of, his spirituality was that. And his whole life, he kind of sought out all these, psychedelic rituals and stuff like that used native plants.
That's so fascinating to me. Just the idea that they exist everywhere. Like take the bouffant toad. Like who, like, that's just a crazy story. Like that's just an animal out there that,
yeah.
If you smoke its, the stuff it
the secretions
ejects when it's, the secretions or whatever. Like what the like what the hell, and then on top of that, I don't know about you guys, but I think about, our own brains and our own chemistry, and we know certain substances have a certain effect on our brains and the chemistry, if we ingest these naturally occurring substances. And then too, I don't know about you guys, I'm sure you have, Rubin, just to put it out there, that dog video where, it clearly ate some psychedelic mushrooms and is, really like having a pretty intense experience. It's just somebody's pet that found these, psychedelic mushrooms and ate them and is sitting there tripping, and then I also think about other animals and other substances that maybe don't have the same effect on our brains that, how many animals are out there, tripping naturally all the time.
Yeah.
And it's part of, we like to think we're this, unique scenario that's, as human beings, that's, we're somehow, through Judeo-Christian, things we've been taught that we're somehow closer to God or whatever. But how is this not, necessarily just a normal evolutionary experience for a lot of species, all across the whole planet,
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know what kind of substances exist in a lot of stuff, and we definitely don't know what kind of effects those might have on other types of animals.
Yeah.
So, how much is this, just this mind altered consciousness state, where, we don't have words to describe it. How many other, organisms in the animal kingdom also experience something comparable?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, to that point, we also don't fully know what our own history with them is. Are we just
Oh,
are we
yeah.
just discovering it now, or are we rediscovering something that was a big part of all these early civilizations that we can't explain, like pyramids and
Yeah.
and hieroglyphics and all this kind of stuff?
I agree. I mean, it would totally make sense that, I'm not saying that, Terence McKenna's stoned ape theory is, that's necessarily what I totally believe in, but I could totally see the plausibility of, an ancient human following around a mammal, a large grazing mammal to hunt. And then they see the dung, because that's the kind of tracking skills that would be required to feed your family and your community. And you see mushrooms growing out of that. You take a few, a small amount, just whatever's growing there fresh. And then all of a sudden you've got, this altered state that allows you to hunt in a superior way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Through like a microdose of, a psilocybin mushroom.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's interesting to think about, I think, psychedelics and ethnobotany in general, gets overlooked by a lot of anthropologists and, people trying to understand human history, like all the people that research, paleo diet stuff and all that. It's like,
right.
I mean, are you skipping over the magic mushroom aspect of that? Because like there's plenty of evidence, to suggest we didn't just discover these in 1900, like this is
right.
This has been here, but yeah. So Stahn, you had some questions about kind of like post psychedelic experience intention and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, first off, I wanted to just go back to LSA because I want to say that was actually like my first time tripping was with Morning Glory seeds. And I definitely suggest for people to check it out, but to do their own research. I mean, you need to make sure you're getting seeds that are untreated, so that you don't have to worry about taking the coat off of them. You can get them like anywhere online because it's a legal seed to own. But yeah, I agree with your comparison to robo tripping. It's very, very, very similar. The weirdest sensation I experienced on it was I was laying in bed after maybe like 4 hours or 3 or 4 hours in, and I'd smoked a good amount, and it felt like somebody was massaging my brain. I don't know, weird sensation, but that was the biggest takeaway I had from my LSA experience. But you got to make sure you get untreated seeds. With Morning Glories, you have to eat like 300. So, or like it's an extreme amount. I think I did like 250 or 300, and I just put it in a smoothie and blended it up. But you don't want to ingest 250 to 300, coated seeds, or you'll end up throwing up. But yeah, so I just had some, I guess, frequently asked questions that come with pre and post tripping. So we'll start with pre and just get your guys' opinions. Like, when I'm trying to, first thing I try to do is come up with intent. And with that, I kind of devise like a plan or like work I need to do, whether it be like meditation or yoga or like, with the months coming up to a trip, if I really want it to be as impactful as it can. And recently I've noticed that my intent is more of something that is within me subconsciously, that it's hard to set. It's hard to set an intent. It's more of something that just is within you. And if you really think about it, you'll know your intent. But I was just wondering, like, what do you guys do pre-trip if you want an impactful trip, whether it be a watershed moment type deal or just more than just taking mushrooms. What sort of work, what sort of groundwork do you guys lay down in the months or weeks beforehand to make sure that you're getting the best out of it that you can, whether it be like fasting, yoga, meditation? What do you guys end up doing?
Well, so I definitely think, like how everyone says, to take on an empty stomach. However, I don't like eat a bunch of crap right until I'm going to fast. So and I think I got this from you, Sean, and it's definitely worked, help feel better like digestively with mushrooms. Is like I just eat like just fruit, like just not eat, don't even eat anything big that day, like just fruit and stay hydrated and stuff like that. I know some people that'll fast for like a couple days beforehand, and like I've never done that. But
honestly, I've never got sick to my stomach on fruit.
Yeah.
Your digestion seems to work pretty good with, fruit, for me at least.
Yeah. Yeah. But, I think what you kind of said there, Stahn, about it's an intent that comes from within is, there's a difference with, taking mushrooms with intent or taking them with an intent, in that,
I agree.
Like I've said, like mushrooms are not going to give you what you want. They're going to give you what you need. So having a specific thing, like if someone's sitting down and be like, I wish I was more creative. I want to be, mushrooms aren't a genie in a bottle. They're a visionary thing. So to take them with intent is what I try to do. And that is just, I'm not taking these because I'm bored. I'm not taking them because I'm going to a concert. Which I do, but that isn't taking it with intent. When you're taking them to party, you're just taking them. They're just a drug at that point. When you take them to be like, this is going to be a moment I remember, I'm going to be open to whatever happens and I'm not going to be afraid. And just getting your set right. That's what I mean by like, take them with intent, is to, not just be ingesting a substance because why the hell not? Like it's
like a harebrained idea.
Right. Yeah. And that takes a lot of mindfulness to really get to that point, but I think all of the things you mentioned, like yoga, which I keep saying I want to get into and I don't, but maybe I'll make that a New Year's resolution or something. I don't know. But, the float tanks and trying to, stay as unplugged from screens as I can and stuff like that. All that stuff leads up to having a better set to be able to, be open to the experience and accept whatever the visionary spirits of the mushroom want to show you or have you show yourself.
Yeah. At my last place of employment, I worked at a float center, and one of the people that I worked with, her good friend went to South America for an ayahuasca trip, and it was, I guess, more of a westernized experience. It wasn't like, in the middle of the forest and you're with the shaman or whatever. There was a shaman, but it's more of like a commune. So it's like a kind of like a tourist destination type thing. And they send you an itinerary of what you're expected. And she forwarded that to me. So I have that, and she said, like, if you even just take 1, 2, or 3 things out of this list of 20, it'll help make your experience better. And, it ranges from diet beforehand, being all natural, to fasting 48 hours before, or also a big one is no caffeine for like a week beforehand.
Yeah. That's one I'd like to get to, but I'm so addicted to coffee.
Yeah, same here, man.
Yeah. No, I think that's kind of cool. It seems like, at least in my mind, that, we've all got our ritual, people, being, somewhat experienced psychonauts. And I think like anything, whether that ritual is real or if it's placebo, whatever makes you feel comfortable and in your zone and, better able to reach the, the state you're after, then go for it, right? I mean, like that's what it's all about, is finding something you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
And being able to get there. And, it's interesting, Stahn, that you were talking about, how you think about an upcoming trip and how you mentally prepare and, what you're actually trying to get out of it and stuff. And I kind of often decide that I'm ready to take a psychedelic experience, months in advance of when I actually get around to doing it. I don't know if you guys are like that too. Like I'll decide like, yeah, I think it's time. And then it kind of builds.
That's exactly what
until I'm looking for the right opportunity. Yeah. And then you just are waiting for the stars to align. And when you've got that space in your life to dedicate to that, because I think, we can all agree on that. Like if you're gonna take the time to do this, you got to take the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I'm shooting for, late spring, early summer. So laying the groundwork right now. But one thing that you brought up, Sean, was just with the ovoids, was that just the ability to let go was easier. You're not fighting the come up or the trip as a whole, even because some people don't understand. Even if you get past the come up, you could still fight the trip.
For sure.
And what do you think whenever you are faced with that challenge? What do you think helps you out most to let go? Both you and Rubin, I'd love to hear.
Well, for me, a lot of times that ends up being what, I take away from the trip actually is like those difficult moments when you're coming up before you hit that, quote unquote peak. And for me, that always sort of ends up being the take home message. So if it's a difficult come up, for the first hour and a half or whatever, if I'm dealing with some difficult emotions or thoughts, a lot of times like my resolution in my mind is like really like my take home message, for what that trip was about. And like I said, it was really weird with that ovoid experience, and that my take home message for that trip, I think actually happened in the first, 30 minutes, 20 minutes when it first started coming on, just to be like, let go. And, and as simple as that was, a lot of times I've had a lot more complex answers that, in my mind that come to me. That one was really simple and quick, but, like Rubin, when we were up in New York, how long was that? Like an hour before, like we kind of jostled ourselves out of that hour and a half. I had a take home thought, something that brought me out of that I don't want to call it a scary place, but that like really, that like unknown place. It's a familiar place, if you've been a psychonaut, but it's also that, unknown when you're coming up, if that makes sense to you guys.
Oh yeah. Well, and what was interesting about that trip too, which again, that was a trip with intent, like we were going up specifically because of the lunar phase we were in. What was it? The Hunter's Moon.
Yeah.
And it's like, it was one of the weekends I could get away and whatever, and be able to go up there and no one else was going to be there and stuff like that. And both of us were like kind of having these ailments at the time. And the tough part of that trip, like my back was hurting me and your nose was hurting you. And that tough part of the trip, of the come up and whatever, where we like weren't talking and like we turned the music down or off, and whatever. We were just like sitting by the fire. Like my back like felt worse than it ever had. And like, I was just floored on the ground, like thinking about, how much this is hurting me, and that I need to, get it figured out and start managing it. And you were sitting there and you said you felt like there was a hook like in your nose, right?
Yeah. It felt like all of a sudden, like a hook grabbed me through the nose, through that bone where it connects to your, face. And just, I felt that like that tension.
Mm-hmm. And
yeah, it was really weird.
Yeah. And I mean, after that, like you ended up having to have surgery on your septum, and it like,
I had a really bad deviated septum, and it was really causing a lot of, airflow problems in my head. And, that was one thing that, helped me realize like this is something I can fix,
Yeah. I mean, you started looking into, going to a doctor like after that. And I started going to a chiropractor and looking into kratom as well and everything from there. And then, you know, now, I mean, I really have pretty minimal back problems, but like I was kind of, both of us were pushing those things into the you know, onto the back burner in our life.
Yeah.
And the mushroom made it so uncomfortable at that time that it was like basically telling us like, this is fucked up. You need to fix this, you know? And, and this is fucking.
Yeah. And I had other thoughts too, you know, at the time, like my now wife, you know, we'd been together a long time at that point, and you know, I resisted the idea of getting married just from like a, you know, more of a idea point of view and not like a real point of view.
Yeah.
Just the idea of being married, I was turned off by that, and it was through no fault of my now wife's fault. It wasn't her fault that I had this idea, and I realized like through that experience, like, you know, thinking of her actually helped me feel better when I was having this difficult idea. You know, my thoughts in my mind and stuff when we're laying there, you know, on the come out, you know, by the fire, and it was soon after that, you know, I realized like, you know, this is silly. Like it's, you know, just get married. You know, there's not, you know, it's not anything more than, you know, than what it is. It's just, you know, don't make a big deal out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, and then after we had all these kind of like realizations and stuff like that, like then, you know, obviously we were through the peak and stuff like that. And it was awesome because like, you know, we didn't really time it out or whatever, but the timing ended up being perfect. Cause like, you know, we were taking it to kind of, you know, have like a moon ritual or whatever. And once we got through all this like difficult realizations and stuff, and we were over the hump, we're like, all right, I think we can walk around now. And we started walking, and we walked down like this like gap in the trees of the driveway, and that fucking moon was like there. It was just huge. And it was just like, all right, now the trip starts. So we like walked around eating apples and like, you know, it's pretty awesome that you know, how special that land I have is to me. But like after that trip, it was like, I felt fucking just super connected to it, you know?
Yeah, man, that was a great experience. And you know, I don't know if other people have tried that before or not, but you know, if you want to have a good night, psychedelic experience, you know, maybe wait one time till you get a nice clear night with a full moon. And it's really fun to go hang out outside in a natural setting and be able to see everything without a flashlight. Yeah, because you know, when your eyes adjust to the full moon, you actually can see quite well.
Yeah,
that's actually just a perfect segue to my next question, which is what do you guys think is the best time of day to ingest? Do you guys time it out? Is it something? I understand for this last one, you guys, you know, had a plan to time it out for the moon, but on a normal non-moon ritual type trip, what do you guys go for?
I mean, day trips are great. They really are, because you know, you're less scared because like, you know, the dark and whatever, your mind can take over, you know? And so like a nice sunny day, you know, where you can lay in the grass and look at clouds, like, I mean, nothing beats that. Like, you know, and that's my whole thing with like, you know, wanting to work towards being a therapist and providing, you know, nature immersion therapy like that, you know, with or without psychedelics. I think it could be a really healing situation, but especially with psychedelics. But yeah, my this summer I tripped up there in New York by myself, and you know, I kind of took a mushroom I ate sclerotia, the stones, and I had like a smoothie for breakfast. So like I was tripping by like lunchtime, I think, you know. And it was just a perfect like 65-degree day, and it was breezy, and there's beautiful white fluffy clouds in the sky, and you know, it was like in July, so there was just like wildflowers like everywhere, and just like walking around. And you know, I'm fortunate enough to have this land. I know not everyone has that, and going to like a public park and stuff like that might be scary, but if anyone has access to some land that they can, you know, chill out in, and doing it during the day makes that much more
even if it's just a nice secluded backyard that somebody that you know that it's going to be a cool trip setter.
Yeah.
And it's going to let you hang out in their really nice backyard. Anything that's going to feel comfortable and peaceful to you, and you feel like you have privacy.
Yeah. And I mean, you're less likely to like get the cops called on you or anything like that if it's during the day, like at night where you might wander where you're not supposed to, or people be like, what's this guy doing in my backyard or whatever. Or, if you are doing it in like a state park or, a public setting, you're more likely to get caught by cops or something like that if you're fucking around on trails and stuff at night. So, it's day tripping for me. Unfortunately is the least likely to happen. Like that takes a lot more planning on my part just because of kids and responsibilities and stuff like that. But I much prefer it for sure.
I definitely find it to be a lot easier of an experience as far as like difficult versus, easier experience. I do kind of equate it to more of a introspective journey at night, which can also be, very beneficial. Especially if you're trying to work through some stuff. But I really enjoy just the connection I feel with nature when the sun's out, and I can really, it's like almost like electric vision. You just start to notice so many natural things around you that you wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I'm all for the silent darkness method, and, my video talking about that is what started all this off and everything. But in no way is that my preferred method. I think it's a very therapeutic method for sure. But I think if you do an outdoor day trip, it's just as therapeutic, but it's kind of like two different medicines almost, it depends on what you're trying to, have
there's no superior way to do anything, like there's going to be people out there that say, oh, well, if you don't do 5 grams and silent darkness and by yourself with, all your devices turned off, fasting for 24 hours while also, it's like, it's not going to work for everybody.
No.
So, I think a lot of people could get a lot out of, having, a half a gram or a gram of cubensis and being able to hang out outside with their friends like that they trust and know aren't going to let them do anything, bad, or that they have to feel embarrassed about if they express, something, that's really powerful to them. They're not going to be embarrassed by that, like that's the most important thing is to feel comfortable with what you're doing, because, like there's no guide for this stuff, like that's what this show is really amazing, is that, you get a lot of perspectives from different people about a lot of different things, and people can, start to see that, we're not all that different with, our thoughts and behaviors.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, that's totally right. That's good to know though. I've never had a day trip, so I've only been in the night before. So that's definitely good to know that.
Yeah.
I think that's what I'm going to shoot for my next one, is just to even see a whole new experience. And I'm going to be by a beach, so I'm going to.
Oh man, that's going to be amazing. Yeah.
It's going to be awesome.
That's on the bucket list, a beach, a nice beach.
Having that setting, and then also on top
dosage
of that, you get the sunset. Like it's going to be crazy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Which takes me to my next question, which is, integration. And it's never as easy as somebody whispering in your ear to be like, hey, do this or do that. It's more of a learning throughout the experience. I mean, you guys said you learned from the physical ailments that you guys had, and you learned from that, but I think majority of the learning is definitely not physical, and it's more internal during these trips. And, for me at least, I haven't really, it's never been anything direct and clear. It's just been more so like a fine tuning of like my decision making compass, or I guess my moral compass. But I was just wondering, what do you guys do to integrate, or I guess while you're in the trip, this will be a harder question, but while you're in the trip, what do you take as learning experiences compared to just, a crazy right turn or left turn in the middle of the trip,
Well, I think that the real learning and the real work is done in the afterglow period. You definitely want to, for as much as the mindfulness promoting stuff we talked about with floating and meditation and yoga and stuff like that, as much as that's important for the pre-trip, it's more important for the post-trip, because you really have to embrace that afterglow and all the positive thoughts and whatever, and the especially if you had like an ego death, the next day you're going to be just glad to be alive. You're going to be like, God, I can't believe all this stuff bothers me and whatever, because like, at least I'm alive, I could be nothing. And, taking time and being able to sit and marinate in that and meditate or float or whatever, I think is like super, super important. I think what's helped me too with, this making YouTube videos and podcasts and stuff like that, like talking about the experiences makes you get a better grip of it, and so even if no one was watching any of this stuff, like just documenting it and getting it out, or going to a therapist and talking about thoughts and stuff like that helps you kind of like firm up what the lessons were and what you really are going to take, going forward. And like going back to my 5 gram video, definitely one thing I don't suggest for integration is getting on a goddamn plane in the morning and going on a fucking cruise.
Yeah.
I don't recommend that. That kind of possibly even helped throw me for more of a loop, because I was like, and I was like seasick, and it's just like a fucking terror. I didn't have an afterglow, other than meeting Wayne Coyne and then being just fucking mind blown from that and thinking that it was like I was in a dream or something like that. I was gonna wake up and I'm still tripping. Like I kind of had that going on the whole time, because I was like, this is so I'm so out of my element, and I'm surrounded by people that I either don't like, or I don't want to know that I tripped last night or whatever. That's just a terrible thing. So it's like, I don't recommend for people, you don't want to go to work the next day.
It's probably good to think of it as really more like a 3-day thing, like, 'cause I found that, even 2 days later, after doing a dosage, my mind's still kind of putting the pieces back together, and it extends a lot longer than that. But I mean, like, there's still a very strong mental state attached with that, even 2 days after the fact. So if you're looking at it from like how am I gonna maximize this as far as for my own therapy or for my own journey, it's better to think about planning ahead like a 3-day block of time where you can really think about stuff, because it's hard for me to say how I know what I've gotten out of it, other than you just kind of let the pieces kind of fall back in place, and you're left with some really strong impressions. At least for me, that's kind of how I'm able to gather what I got out of it. It's just like what kind of strong impressions are like really like burned image in my brain from that recent experience. And that's what I really think it's helpful to have, a couple days to kind of let that kind of sort itself out in your brain.
Yeah, that's what makes it so hard for me with, kids and stuff, is like, my last bunch of trips, which still were fine or whatever, it's kind of like spur of the moment. Like, I find out about lunchtime, like I'm not going to have the kids, overnight. And it's like, oh shit, we can do mushrooms. Okay. I'll start getting stuff together, or whatever. And so that's why I often don't take very high doses anymore. 'Cause I'm like, I'm going to be worried about whatever I was worried about this morning, even if I think I'm not. And, I can't get overwhelmed, so
yeah.
That's where I
got to keep it together.
Yeah. Or I have to supplement with anti-anxiety stuff. I've found that Phenibut the last time, man, that was I didn't have any sort of anxious come up. I ended up smoking a bunch of weed on the come up, which normally makes me not anxious and stuff like that. I definitely, I suggest for anyone that's been trying to like, kind of be able to calm down when, when the anxiety or the fear starts up, to try Phenibut, definitely research taking that and everything. But, if you've been working on it and you can't calm yourself down, like that's a good crutch. And it's a lot better than, I see a lot of people suggest Xanax and, Valium, and I've tried those too, but it makes you too like dulled, like you're definitely, it definitely kills some of the trip, and the Phenibut didn't do that. And if anything, it potentiated it. So, but that helps because like, if it's not a planned out trip that I can like prepare myself for, and it's like, oh, I can trip tonight and I've been wanting to trip, I'll get anxious, and it'll kind of ramp up the anxious part of the set going on, so like that's the, it's hard for me to calm that down. And so like, I do need a crutch, and that's, I've found that Phenibut's a better crutch than all the other stuff. So I have one last question that I wanted to talk about with you, Sean. And I've mentioned it a couple times on our other podcast, but you're the only other one I know that's read this book. But one of the things when I read the 3 Stigmata of Eldritch Power, one of the things that I kind of thought about, and I know a lot about, kind of the genetics and stuff that have in the hybridization of cannabis and stuff like that, and how humans have like kind of altered this naturally occurring plant into like, are able to breed it for its certain characteristics and all of this stuff. And so in Eldritch Palmer, where basically that's a futuristic view of the world, where there is this psychedelic lichen that it creates this certain experience, and people take it and they go to a very specific place, and they can adjust their experience with these little play set things and stuff like that. And so, we've talked about a couple times with people, but I'd like to hear your opinion on like, do you see with the rise of popularity of mushrooms and the rise in people that are growing them and all of that, do you see that there could be something like that where mushrooms are used to, breed out certain parts of the experience and to have kind of a, super mushroom that has a very, very guided experience?
Yeah, I've heard you talk about this before on other podcasts, but I don't know. It's a really interesting idea to think about, though. As far as, a particular strain or something like that, I don't know. It's so difficult to predict what each individual is going to react to. Even prescription medication, and they know pretty definitively what happens when somebody takes it. Even that, your mileage may vary according to each individual. So as far as that's concerned, but I don't know. I think it's a really interesting thought experiment to think about. What it would be like if you could kind of pick up where you left off. I think is kind of what you mean as far as like, crossing over into the books realm. As far as like every time you took a psychedelic, you would kind of sort of pick back up where you left off in that realm.
Yeah,
and you could kind of slowly progress your way, similar to what it would be with like a role-playing video game or something like that.
Yeah. Or I wonder if we could get to the point where you're like, I want to have I want to see a lot of like Aztec, symbology and have like a kind of, South American vibe to this. And like, you could take this certain strain that is definitely going to give you that.
I could almost see it being easier to achieve this state if you almost had like a simulation, like a augmented reality type situation.
Yeah.
And you had other types of mind-altering substances.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you. The problem I would have with possibly having a tailor-made psilocybin experience would be that we're talking about an organism that has its arguably its own consciousness too. So
yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense, but there's a lot of
Yeah, it just matters. I guess it depends on what's actually going on with psychedelics, especially psilocybin. How much of our psychology and our spirit and things that you can't control and you can't, predetermine and stuff like that. How much of that is at play compared to, is this just a molecule that is triggering certain receptors in our brain? And, how does tinkering with those receptors change our experience, and how much does our psychology play into that? And I think the answer is somewhere in the middle. I think that's what Shulkin kind of showed.
Yeah, I think so.
Is that, you can tailor a lot of the experience, a lot of the body feel and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, your consciousness and your soul and your spirit drive most of this experience, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. I think, everything's always changing, and, and the fact that, your perspective on life and your vantage point on life, can change, day to day, definitely changes, year to year for sure. It's a really complex subject, and it seems to me that, our mental state really does determine pretty much all of it. if you're in a really, and that just for me, that further reinforces the whole idea of set and setting. Because if your mindset's really good and you have a nice, safe place to be, the chances of something, dramatically bad happening to you are pretty reduced. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And, I do think, though, that we will see something like what's happened with cannabis, where you can produce this strain that just makes CBD and isn't very psychoactive or whatever. I wonder if, as we research more with psilocybin mushrooms, like if we're going to find out that if you don't have the psilocybin or psilocin in there, or the baeocystin, or if you don't have the tryptamines in there, what are the other alkaloids or constituents of it that can be extremely beneficial? And if we'll have a if there will be a CBD type moment for psilocybin mushrooms, as they're more researched and as they're grown more and stuff like that,
or to get all body load or something like that.
Yeah.
Instead of it would be more similar to, I don't know, I haven't done it, but more similar to like a tranquilized experience. I really don't know. I mean, it's interesting to think of. Certainly it seems like, as far as, our understanding of chemistry, we like to think that, as humans, we've really come a long ways, but as far as, chemistry's concerned, that's a pretty young, science in the grand scheme of things. Science in general is pretty young. So our understanding of psychedelics and brain chemistry and all of these altered states of consciousness, it's there's a lot we don't know, that's for sure.
Yep. Well, and until the research catches up, that's what makes doing podcasts and YouTube videos so much more important. And especially like what I've been wanting to do with this and get everyone's perspective and story, is we have to compile the evidence. If they're not going to put the money into the research to do it, like, we've got to be doing the research and recording the data, it can't hurt, so that's kind of, that's where I'm happy that all this is going. And I definitely think, we're moving towards getting a better understanding of what's going on. But I also know that, the universal tragic comedy of life is that we probably never will know, all we can do is seek a glimpse of understanding, I think, in this area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the one thing that psychedelics do give people is the ability to, take something, ingest something that they know is going to have a dramatic effect, and it's not going to kill them. The physical part is not going to, the harm from a psilocybin mushroom ingestion is basically, nil. There's basically no physical harm. And so the fact that, you can ingest a substance that you know is going to have a dramatic impact on the way you think and feel. You know, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, man. But so I got a kid about to get off the bus, so we're gonna have to wrap it up. But I I want to thank you, man, so much for coming on. I'm glad you were off today so we could get this done during the day, man. It was really fun. It was good talking to you.
Yeah, it's good talking to you too, Rubin, and good talking with you, Stahn. And I appreciate you guys having me on, and I've been really enjoying the podcast. And it's awesome. It's a great idea. It's cool to hear other people's perspective on things, especially people that have a lot of knowledge about certain subjects. But I think it's also really cool just to hear other regular folk that have just are on their own journey, to hear their stories as well. And I think the format of your podcast is great. It doesn't. You don't have to have some sort of celebrity connection or some sort of super expert on to have a really interesting, entertaining story. And thanks, guys, for putting all the work into it.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and like I said at the start, thank you too for our discussions led up to all this, and so like you said, I guess it was honing my craft or whatever, but it definitely built my perspective that definitely seems to resonate with more people than just us. So so thank you as well. And again, it's episode number 10. Thank you to everyone that's supported us so far to keep us going and giving us props and everything. And like I mentioned at the start, and I'll mention again now, if you use Discord or would like to have a more ongoing conversation with all the other people that have been gravitating towards this channel and stuff, definitely get on Discord. We'll put the invite link in the descriptions of all the videos and stuff. There's been some pretty good questions on there and conversations and people sharing their own art and YouTube videos they like and stuff like that. It's just been, Mushroom ID and there's a trip sitter channel if someone needs help while they're tripping and needs someone to talk to. So it's a really cool thing. So definitely check that out if you haven't already. There's also the Google hotline number that you can call and leave a voicemail. We've only had one so far, but if anyone wants to leave a question and direct a conversation for a future podcast, that would be awesome. And Stahn, what's that number again to call?
It's 567-233-1335.
Awesome. So well, that's about it for now, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for helping find the others.